First, I want to thank Denisha, because this should have happened 20 years ago, as far as I've been in the business 25. So, I mean, homage to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we've already clapped for her, but let's do it again, because what an amazing, amazing conference. One thing she said last night, if you weren't here, which made me, I got a little note card, and I'm going to tell you guys all about branding and how to brand yourselves. But one thing she said last night that resonated with me, and I was like, oh, I got to change my whole setup for tomorrow. She said, I want authenticity. I want you to tell your story. I want the real, right? I don't, I can sit up here and be like, and this is how you brand yourself, and, go through all of it, and I'm going to do that. But my authenticity in my story is, I felt that if I told you my story, you'd get it, because I'm not just standing up here as a woman who embarked on a company 25 years ago, but I'm standing up here as a female entrepreneur that never got a leg up, that had to work really hard. And my story is a little bit unique and different. I'm a grassroots girl. I'm not a girl who came in with a plan or any of that stuff. I'm a foster kid. I was raised by a grandmother. My mother was mentally ill. I was a twin. I was separated from my twin at an early age, at the age of 5, and reunited with her when I was 19. Never knew who my dad was until I was about 16. Didn't want anything to do with me until about 8 years ago, and I took care of him until he died. I went to college. I worked 3 jobs, put myself through college, because my grandmother didn't make less enough money to not have me on, or didn't make enough money, rather, to not me have on financial aid. So I had to work 3 jobs, put myself through school. But I was a journalist, and I was someone who was a co-host of a morning show. I did some TV. I worked for CNN a little bit. And then I had an opportunity. I was jobless. I was in LA, and I was jobless. I was laying on my girlfriend's floor in her apartment. That's where I was sleeping. And, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. And I had an opportunity to a gentleman by the name of Kevin Duckworth, God rest his soul. He played for the Trailblazers, and then he ended up going to the Clippers. He was actually a friend of mine, because I had interviewed him quite often when I lived in Oregon. And he asked me if I could help him. And I was like, well, help you do what? And he said, well, do some errands. And I said, I am college educated. You want me to go pick up your suits at the dry cleaner? He's like, yeah, but, no shame in my game. I was jobless at the time. I needed some money. So I started helping him, and he ended up dating a girl by the name of Kim Whitley. She's an actress, character actress. And she was on a set of a television show at the time called Sparks. And Sparks had James Avery, dad of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Robin Givens, Miguel Nunez, Arif Kitchen. And I ended up working for all of them because they wanted me to kind of do what I was doing and I was like, well, I could kind of open up an agency. Now I got enough clients. Well, I could just be a management company, right? And then one of my biggest mentors will always be one of my biggest mentors, and I say he's like my father, and he hates when I say that because it makes him feel old, was Samuel Jackson, and he was one of my first clients. And I did the same stuff for him, but I kind of started moving into like the more marketing stuff, like getting him deals. He was a big golfer. A lot of people didn't know that at the time. Getting some stuff with Oakley and things like that. And I was like, I kind of like this. And then I met a kid by the name of Tony Gonzalez. And Tony had just been drafted. And he was trying to date Robin Givens, who was one of my clients. And he lied about his age. She lied about her age. And but they wanted to go through me. Like, she didn't want to give up her number. He was trying to get her number. But eventually, Tony was with one of the biggest agents at the time, which was Lee Steinberg. And he was in this big agency with 100 clients. Lee at the time was the biggest agent out there. And he's like, Denise, can you help me do what you're helping with the other people? And I'm like, well, don't you got some representation? And he's like, well, yeah, but I'm getting lost in the shuffle. And I'm thinking, well, you were a first-round draft pick. I didn't know so much about the NFL at that time, because this was 25 years ago. And he says, I just need some help, Denise. I said, well, okay, let's. I'm thinking in my head, well, let's just try this out. It can't be much different than working with entertainers, right? It wasn't. All of the issues I had with entertainers were the same issues that the athletes were having. And I started working with Tony, and what I found was I loved working in sports. I loved helping athletes, because when I started working with Tony, that catapulted me into working with other athletes, right? They saw what I was doing for Tony. But then I had to figure out what was my brand. What was I doing, and what were people going to think of me when they heard Entertainers and Athletes Group, which eventually merged into EAG Sports Management? What was that? What were they going to know, right? And what I wanted them to know that I'm a hardworking female who's trying to put a business together. I didn't have a plan. There was no plan. I was the seat of my pants. I really didn't have the internet at the time, which now just really aged me. It was just starting, right? Dee, 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 dee. And it'd take like an hour for you to connect, right? Google didn't come into play for a couple years later. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to have to run by the seat of my pants. So I did. And what I found was there were so many athletes in a space, especially in the NFL, because there's 1,900 in the NFL, there's 370-something in NBA. It was a little more prevalent in the NFL that athletes were with agents, and mind you, there's a lot of great agents out there, but agents take on 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 clients, and the athletes aren't getting their services met. They're not getting their PR. They might get a little bit of marketing. They're not getting the day-to-day. They're not getting the philanthropic help to open up foundations. And where was the crisis management? Because once the internet hit and once social media hit, crisis became much more prevalent in the news, right? So why couldn't I, this woman, put together a one-stop shop? Why can't I be that person? Oh, Denise, but there's not really any women working in sports like that. Well, why can't there be? I grew up with adversity. I know adversity. I know how it is to work hard for something, and I know how it is when people tell me I can't do something. But I've always had that mentality of like, oh, you see I can't do that? Oh, I'm going to show you. So for me, it was like, well, why can't I work in sports? I'm going to do this. So I was one of the very first females to open up a company that she did and be able to rep the talent that I did, because I definitely had A-listers, but I also had guys that were second team who didn't see a lot of playing time in their first couple years, right? So I set out to build their brand. I'm like, I'm going to make sure that these guys segue into something after they're done playing that they can then still make income, right? And along the way, guess what? I got to help out a lot of wives, right? Not intentionally, but when you're with your significant other, I want to see you prosper and do well too. I'm not an agent. I'm not one of those people that, oh, it's the wife. Oh gosh, you guys all know. There's people around that do that, right? Oh, it's the wife. I'm like, these are young women that have so much to offer, right? Why can't we help them? Or be there, be a bridge to get them help, whatever help it is that they need. Sometimes a wife will come to me and she'll be like, Denise, I want to do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, you know what, babe? I am not that person for you, but I'm going to find you that person, right? Let me help you. I'm going to help you. So today, for me, about building a brand is really being about your authentic self, which so many of the women have set up here already, right? And so now I'm going to get into a little bit about how to build your brand. But before I do, I want to ask you, how many of you in this room already have businesses, want to open up a business, have anything to do with business, or have a thought of bringing into a business? Just raise your hand. There's a lot of you. That's great. That's great. For brand building, for me, branding is something when you first start out, you have to create a brand identity. And people think, well, what is a brand identity? A brand identity is really what you're showing the public for the first time. What is your brand? Are you selling children's clothes? Are you selling makeup? Are you offering a service? I have a wife who opened up a cleaning service. It's doing remarkably well. Right? What is your brand? And your brand identity also includes the logo, the colors of the logo, the website, your business cards. All of that needs to be put together first before you start anything. And very simple, right? I have a wife in the audience. I don't know if she wants me to say her name. But she put together, very authentic, put together a child's clothing line and store. And I like to say she did a grassroots effort because she did it pretty much all on her own. And she didn't really ask us for anything, which I would love to do. But my point being is she's been really successful doing it. But she started out authentically with names from her mother and her husband's grandmother. And she has put in the colors of the logo that made it super like, oh, this is a child's line. It's just beautiful. She did such a great job. And she didn't really, I don't know where she decided, or when she decided rather, I guess you could say, to do this, but when she did decide, she put both feet in. And I, from the outside looking in, have been just amazed by her success. And not that I didn't think she could do it, it's just that she's really done it on a grassroots effort, right? She didn't hire a big PR firm. She didn't go and do tons of advertising. Her husband helps promote her, which is a huge thing, which I tell all of you ladies to do. If you can get your husband to use his social media to help your businesses, there's no shame in that, right? People are like, oh, like her husband posted on that. Well, yeah. I mean, if I had a husband to help me with my business, heck yeah. You know, this is going to help us all in the end. So there's no shame in that, right? But taking that opportunity and the branding that she started with was so authentic that it makes so much sense that it's successful, because she started out with a great plan, right? So now I'm going to go into a little bit more of what your brand needs to look like and how you do it. And now I've got my cards. Consistency is one of the other keys, right? You start out with a clothing line, and then all of a sudden you want to do jewelry, and then all of a sudden you want to do consistency. To a consumer is so important. What am I going to expect when I see you? What do I know when I've got Set Magazine? I know when I open up Set Magazine what to expect. The consistency has been there for years. You want to be successful at your brand. You want to be successful at building it. The consistency is so important. So try not to deviate. And if you want to deviate, you got to have a plan put together, right? How am I rebranding myself if I want to do something differently? And, let's see, what can they expect? Your audience, this is another thing. When you start promoting yourself, whether that's through PR, marketing, depending on what it is that you're wanting to do, who is your audience? Is it mothers? Is it fathers? Is it both? Is it stay-at-home moms? Figure out who your audience is, because that is so important when building your brand. Your audience can be, like someone said in here earlier, I can't remember, she's like, oh, I only had 1,000 followers, but my book sold out, because she knew how to focus her brand to the right audience. She didn't need 1 million followers. She needed a group of consistent people that knew what her brand was to help her sell it, right? You don't need 1 million followers to be successful. The wife I talked about earlier doesn't have 1 million followers, but boy, she is successful, right? So it's really important about the consistency of your brand and the audience. Make sure that you know who you're going to the audience. Does anybody in here know what P&A is? Anybody know what P&A is? Crucial to your brand. P&A is publicity and advertising. And there goes my glasses. Oh, excuse me. Publicity and advertising. One is more expensive than the other. Advertising is taking out an ad to promote your company. Let's say you have a makeup line, and I want to advertise it, right? So I want to put it in, Claire Magazine. I want it to be on my local station, CBS, NBC, ABC, and I want to put together an ad. Those ads are incredibly expensive. To put in a magazine could be anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000 for one ad. To put it on television, a little bit cheaper, depending on if it's a local station, right? But it's very expensive. But then you go to publicity. Here's where you might need a publicist. Publicity is much cheaper. You hire a publicist, 3, 4, 5, 70. If you're doing a brand PR can be more expensive, $7,500 a month. $7,500 a month sounds like it's expensive, right? But if you paid for the advertising, you'd be paying. There's one guy years ago. I like to tell this story because then it's all in perspective. Jared Allen. I had him after I had Tony Gonzalez, so very, very long time. And one day he came to me and he goes, Denise, because we did his PR. He goes, how much, what am I getting for this PR? And I was like, oh, honey, I got to quantify this for you, don't I? So I said, let me tell you something. I had you on MTV Cribs. That was 30 minutes of advertising for you. If you were Coca-Cola, that would have cost you probably about $500,000. I said, and then I got you in ESPN, the magazine, three page, One page is $85,000. So that's another $250,000. By the time we added up all the PR that he got, because everything had to be quantified, right? If I'd been Coca-Cola, this is what I would have had to pay for this visibility. We were about $4 million in. And at the time, he was paying $2,500 a month. And he turned to me and he said, Denise, I won't ever ask you that question again. I said, thank you, Jared. Because I had to quantify it, right? People need to know what they're getting in return. So when you're building your brand, and of course, PR is my shtick, so I'm going to promote it, right? But when you're building your brand, PR is essential because you don't want to pay the advertising dollars right away. When you get to be like Coca-Cola or Tesla, or then you go and you pay the advertising dollars because those are really expensive. But on the PR side, if you find yourself a good publicist, and when you're looking for a publicist, ladies, find someone that knows what they're doing, right? I work in sports. I publicize men. That is my thing. I've done it for 25 years. I might not be the best publicist for you. Right? I help, but I might want to find you a brand-building publicist, right, that does nothing but product. So when you're looking, make sure, and then also the fees, right? What are they charging you? Who have they worked with? What brands have they helped you build? It's so very important. So make sure that you're picking that, because when PR rolls around, you can get a lot for your, a lot of bite for your buck, I like to say. There's so much that you can get out of a PR agency, and all the stuff that comes with that, right? Building the brand, seeding. Does anybody know what seeding is? So seeding is what brands mostly do to get people to. So I'm working with Robin Givens, and she has a clothing line, and I start mailing out her clothes to other celebs, other wives, other players. All I ask them to do is post it online. Seeding is super important when you're building a brand. I've got this great makeup line. Girl, talk to all your friends. Talk to all the wives. Talk to any celebs you know, any celebs your husband knows. Can I send you some of my makeup? Can you please, all I want you to do is just post about it. Because that advertising there, that PR, whatever you want to call it, because it really runs together, is priceless when you're reaching all of those followers, right? So important. And that's the other thing, is how do you want to, and when you're building your brand, how do you want to build your brand? Do you want to do it through social media? Do you want it to encompass all of media? What does that landscape look for you? And that's got to be part of your plan, right? Is P&A. P&A is probably the most important thing when you're building your brand, after you've figured out what your brand is. So I feel like that's probably the biggest thing I would take away from this, is your publicity and your advertising. Your PR, it increases your brand sentiment. It creates a practice for the playing field of people knowing, where you are. Like I always say, when if Cheerios ran off the shelf, you'd remember Cheerios for a while, but then what's on the shelf now? Oh, there's Frosted Flakes, and there's Cocoa Puffs, and then literally Cheerios, I forgot Cheerios existed. It's kind of like that when you're building your brand. It's like, I always tell people, like, people sometimes go, well, I'm going to stop PR for a while. I'm like, okay, that's what you want to do. But realistically, when you stop the wheel from turning, you stop the visibility of the brand, whether it's a person, an athlete, or a product. Right? That we have had, I always like to roll in my company, and when I'm talking, is we've had guys 14, 15, 16 years for a reason, because they know the value of building their brand off the field. Because football doesn't last forever, so I got to keep building this brand so I can parlay. We parlayed guys into acting. We parlayed guys into, I have 6 guys on television right now, broadcasters. We've parlayed guys into being businessman. I had, you guys might know him, or his wife, Chester Pitts. And I love this story. And I said, I want you to go to the Kentucky Derby. He's like, Denise, I don't want to watch no horses run. I said, I'm not sending you there to watch the race. I said, the Kentucky Derby, on an annual basis, has the biggest, because he always wants to be a Fortune 500 owner, right? I said, it has the biggest party in the country of men of color and women of color, Fortune 500 owners. I said, I'm sending you to go to that party because I want to put you in a place where you're going to meet the people you want to become. That's part of my PR plan for you. He's like, oh, okay, Denise, I'll go. I said, and then you can watch the horse race if you want to. No big deal, right? He gets to that party, he calls me, Denise, you were right. I was like, was I? Fabulous. And now he's doing so well after he retired, but I put him in a place. PR can do so many things for your brand, right? It's not always about just putting you in front of a camera or putting you in a magazine. It's also putting you in the right place. You want to build a brand? Where can we build your brand? Can we send you to the Kentucky Derby and have you have a little place there to show your brand off to all these Fortune 500 companies? Where are we building your brand? There's so many opportunities. I think one of the things I want you to take away from this is don't ever let anybody tell you can't do something when you're building your brand. Because, yes, have a business plan. I didn't. I was successful, but that's a whole nother story. But having a plan and trying to follow that plan is really important, but also making sure that you stay authentic to that brand. And getting that brand out there. People don't come to what they don't know exists, right? And I even tell that to athletes. Yeah, people in the NFL that love watching football know who you are, but do the stay-at-home moms know who you are? You want to be endorsed by Citizen Watches, but their targeted audience is the moms watching Ellen? Well, we got to get you out of football. We got to cross you over into the lifestyle, right? That's what you want with your brand, because people are brands too, right? You guys are brands. You have brands, right? So don't let anybody tell you, well, you got to stay in sports or you got to stay in this category, right? You can cross over into other categories to make yourself more visible to more audiences, not just one, right? So again, there's a ton. I could stand up here for hours, and I don't have that much time. But I wanted to kind of make sure that you guys understand the process of brand building. I'm going to be around, so please feel free to ask questions. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to speak to all of you ladies. The testimonies earlier were like mind-boggling to me. I felt connected in so many different ways. I'm so proud of all of you for showing up for yourselves, because you guys have lives outside of your husbands. You have businesses, you have dreams, and I encourage you all to follow them and don't let anybody tell you can't. I've seen that happen before, and, oh, you're an NFL wife, you just have to be the wife and stay at home, and no, you don't. And think of your future. You're so good at helping your husband's future, but don't forget about your own. And I say that to a couple women that I know very well in this audience that have. And thank you for letting me grace the stage and talk to all of you, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So thank you so much.
What do you think about parents, mothers who have these young student athletes who are immersing in sports? Is different now for our young millennials. I have 2 boys that are student athletes, teenagers, that have already been getting heavily recruited with colleges and like teams and stuff like that. And I know as parents, you kind of have to make sure you kind of govern your children, but then also make sure you put the right people in place to kind of protect them, but then also, I guess kind of carry them through that process. Do you have any advice to any of the mothers of athletes?
Oh, yes.
Kind of.
So there's a space that's been created now with NIL. Everybody knows what NIL is, right? Name, image, and likeness. And now kids can get paid for going into college and all that stuff. As a parent, I would say be very wary of the people that are trying to rep your child at such a young age. And again, this is nothing to. I work with some of the best agents. Some of the agents send us guys. We send them guys. I work with a lot of the agents, and so this is not a knock against the agents. But agents' jobs, remember what their jobs are, is to bring in the money. So they're going to. A lot of them now are looking at these young kids in high school, and they're like, "Hey, we'll pay you $100,000. Come with us," because what they see is the bigger picture. Can I represent him when he makes it to the NFL? And that's when I'm going to make my real money, right? So a lot of them aren't necessarily as authentic, and they're offering kids stuff because they can now. So I just say tread lightly and be very wary of what is the incentive, right? The incentive is I want to be his agent, so I'm going to pay him at a really young age. And look, there's a great opportunity here for some of these kids to make some money or to be represented by some great people, but do your homework, right? The one thing I've learned about agents over the years, they all say the same thing. we're going to make you a star. We're going to do this for you. We're going to do that for you. And then after like a couple years, you're like, what happened to my agent? Where'd he go? Which is fine, because that's how come I'm in business. I was like, oh, we'll take care of all that for you. But at such a young age now, I worry for parents because it sounds so good, right? Oh, we're going to take care of your son. We're going to do this for him. We're going to do that for him. And there's an incentive there, right? There's always an incentive because an agent's looking to make money. I mean, look, everybody's trying to make a living, so I kind of sounds weird when I say that, but what is the incentive long term, and are they, I always say do your homework. Don't just meet with one agent. Don't meet with just one financial advisor. Whenever we've had guys that wanted to change agents, actually helped one of the wives and her husband years ago, and I literally sat down 9 agents in front of him, sat down multiple financial advisors, and I said, your choice. But all of these people I've worked with for 15, 20 years, and I know they're all going to, no matter who you pick, he's going to be good for you, because I'm stubborn when it comes to like representation. I'm like, well, what are you going to do for him? How much are you going to pay? 2%, not 3%. Like it's kind of overlooking. I know I'm kind of answering a long question to your short, or a long answer to your short question, but you want to do your due diligence when those people start coming at you for representation for your child. And at such a young age, you have to be really careful, because some of these people, they're slick, man. They get in and they're talking to your kid before they even talk to you, and that's a no-no. You better talk to me. I'm the mother or the father, and then we'll sit down and have a chat with my child. But you do your due diligence first. You talk to these people first, and then you welcome them into your home with your child. So I hope I answered your question, but it's just because it's getting so much younger now. Like, I was just watching a 17-year-old kid. He's a quarterback. I can't remember his name. I was watching him on Instagram last night, and I'm like, that kid is fire, man. And he's already worth $1 million. He's 17 years old. I was like, well, who's giving him $1 million? Right? Like, 17 years old, oh my gosh, he's got to have a financial advisor now. He's got to make sure his parents are paying attention. So it's just getting so much younger. So as a parent, I just suggest that you take multiple interviews with people, take your time, there is no rush, and make sure that your kid is happy. That's really what it comes down to. So I hope I answered that question.